It had worked countless times before with predictable success. But the Crusaders possessed one critical advantage nobody had expected: absolute discipline, born of desperation and Baldwin's iron will. Not a single knight broke formation, despite every warrior instinct screaming to chase fleeing enemies. The infantry held their ground like bronze statues. The feigned retreat terror of battlefield tactics across the east had failed completely for the first time. Saladin watched from his command position on a nearby hill, carefully counting Crusader casualties, measuring their formation cohesion with a general's calculating eye. His mental arithmetic was precise and deeply troubling. Traditional Islamic tactics weren't working at all. The Iron Hedgehog was proving impervious to every standard approach in his extensive playbook. What followed next would shatter everything Saladin thought he understood about Crusader capabilities. Instead of waiting passively for the next assault, Baldwin ordered something unprecedented in defensive warfare. The entire formation began advancing across the plain. Not charging wildly, but advancing. Step by synchronized step, the Iron Hedgehog rolled forward with mechanical precision. Imagine the sound of 4,750 men moving in perfect unison, the rhythmic crash of armored feet, the forest of pikes catching morning sunlight, the grinding inexorability of it. The psychological impact on Muslim morale was devastating to witness. Cavalry trained for fluid mobility and hit-and-run tactics faced an advancing fortress of steel and determination that wouldn't stop. Then Saladin gave the order that would transform disciplined advance into absolute chaos. Full assault, all cavalry divisions, now. Saladin's command echoed across the Muslim lines like thunder. 8,000 horsemen surged forward simultaneously in the largest cavalry charge of the entire Third Crusade era. The ground shook with such violence that men inside Belvoir Castle later swore under oath that the stone walls trembled. The sensory overload was overwhelming beyond description. Dust clouds rising 100 feet high, the screaming of thousands of horses, the crash of steel on wood as lances met pike shafts in collision. The Crusader line completely disappeared in a maelstrom of horses, dust, and violence. But then came the moment that would echo through 8 centuries of military history. The Iron Hedgehog didn't just bend under the assault, it flexed like a living thing responding to threat. As Muslim cavalry crashed into one section with overwhelming force, that portion of the line would buckle carefully backward while adjacent sections swung inward, like closing doors on a hinge. The attacking cavalry found themselves not breaking through to glory, but being funneled into prepared kill zones from 3 sides. Crossbow bolts flew from 3 directions simultaneously into packed masses of horsemen unable to maneuver. At point-blank range with nowhere to dodge, the devastation was absolute and merciless. A Templar knight surviving the battle later wrote, "The Saracens fell like wheat before the scythe. Their magnificent cavalry, pride of all Islam, died, pressed against our pikes, unable to advance toward glory or retreat to safety. In 20 minutes of sustained slaughter, 400 Muslim cavalry lay dead or dying on the field." The brutal mathematics were inescapable. At this exchange rate, Saladin would lose his entire mounted force before breaking the formation. The attacking waves pulled back reluctantly, leaving a carpet of dead horses and men stretching across the plain. But Saladin wasn't retreating or admitting defeat. He was learning, adapting, calculating new approaches. The next assault combined every Turkish tactical trick perfected over centuries. 2,000 light cavalry attacked in coordinated waves, each group feigning retreat after minimal contact. They wheeled, charged from unexpected angles, tried desperately to draw out impetuous individual knights. Mounted archers galloped past at just 30 yards distance, each rider loosing 6 arrows in as many seconds before wheeling away to safety. What happened next defied all tactical logic and Islamic military doctrine. The Crusader infantry began shooting back with devastating accuracy. Hidden among the pikemen were Genoese crossbowmen, Europe's absolute finest marksmen, hired at enormous cost. As Turkish cavalry swept past thinking themselves safe at galloping speed, crossbow bolts found gaps in their lighter armor with lethal precision. This single tactical decision would determine whether Christianity survived in the East. Baldwin, despite barely remaining conscious from pain and exhaustion, had distributed his precious missile troops throughout the formation rather than concentrating them in one place. Every section of the Iron Hedgehog could defend itself against horse archers independently. The feigned retreats escalated in desperation. Groups of 50 to 100 cavalry would charge directly at one specific spot, break away at the last possible second, wheel around attempting to draw pursuit into ambush. The discipline required to resist was superhuman. Young knights watching enemies flee gripped their reins until knuckles went white, but the formation held through sheer willpower. In this phase alone, Crusader crossbowmen expended 8,000 bolts. Each bolt represented a potential kill at close range. Muslim casualties mounted steadily, while Crusader losses remained miraculously minimal. The Iron Hedgehog was systematically bleeding Saladin's army white. But the real test was only beginning. Frustrated by completely failed cavalry charges, Muslim commanders ordered their infantry forward, supported by dismounted elite knights. Now, the battle transformed into grinding melee combat, the one thing the outnumbered Crusaders absolutely couldn't afford. Individual combat erupted all along the defensive line. A Hospitaller sergeant held his section with 3 arrows protruding from his mail, refusing to fall. A Muslim emir died trying to break through to Baldwin's royal banner, cut down by an anonymous spearman. The Latin chronicles preserve names lost to history. Brother William, who held a critical gap alone for minutes. Sergeant Garcia, who killed 6 attackers before finally falling. But then the Crusaders revealed their formation's hidden capability. The Iron Hedgehog had one more devastating secret. It could attack. At a horn signal, sections of the pike wall suddenly opened like gates. Through these gaps poured mounted knights in tight wedge formations, smashing into disorganized Muslim infantry still reeling from their failed assault against the pikes. The countercharge was perfectly timed for maximum shock. Muslim foot soldiers pressed against the pike wall couldn't form proper ranks against the sudden cavalry assault from unexpected angles. Knights carved bloody paths through packed enemies before wheeling back through the same gaps they'd exited. The formation sealed behind them instantly, like water closing. 400 more Muslim dead in 5 minutes of systematic butchery. But Saladin had witnessed similar tactics before. At Mongisard in 1177, young Baldwin had used comparable maneuvers. The Sultan prepared his calculated response based on that painful lesson. Every archer, maximum rate of fire. Saladin's command unleashed literal hell on earth. 12,000 mounted archers began circling the Crusader formation at varying distances, each man loosing arrows as fast as he could, knock them to his bowstring. 30,000 arrows per minute, a steel rain that turned the sky dark as dusk. The Crusader shield wall transformed into a turtle shell, each man covering himself and his neighbor as arrows fell like judgment. Arrows struck with such density that shields resembled porcupines within minutes, but mathematics was about to collide with medieval courage in the cruelest way. Even with shields raised in desperation, gaps existed. Necks, legs, sword, arms exposed. Men began falling to the unstoppable barrage. A wounded knight later described the experience in vivid detail. The arrows fell like hail in the worst storm. You couldn't see the sun through their flight. Men prayed aloud, thinking the final day had come. My shield carried 18 shafts when the storm finally ended. But the Crusaders had prepared for this apocalyptic scenario too. Pavie shields' massive rectangular barriers normally used in siege warfare had been distributed strategically throughout the formation. These created sheltered spaces where wounded could be dragged to safety, where crossbowmen could reload without exposure. What Saladin witnessed next from his hill made him fundamentally reconsider everything. Despite the arrow storm, despite mounting casualties, despite every reason to break, the Iron Hedgehog continued its inexorable advance, step by step, leaving dead and wounded in its wake, but never breaking formation integrity. The psychological impact on Muslim morale was devastating beyond any physical wounds. Then came the order that shocked both armies into stunned silence. From his command hill, Saladin performed the brutal calculation that marked him as history's greatest Islamic general. His army had lost 2,000 dead against 180 Crusaders. The exchange rate was catastrophically unsustainable. Worse, his army's morale was visibly cracking. Warriors who'd conquered from Egypt to Syria were being systematically destroyed by a force they outnumbered 40 to 1. "Signal the withdrawal," Saladin commanded quietly. His emirs protested in disbelief. They still possessed overwhelming numerical superiority. But Saladin saw what they couldn't. The Iron Hedgehog could eventually be defeated, but at what unacceptable cost? Lose 10,000 elite troops to kill 750? Such a victory would be militarily meaningless, strategically catastrophic. The withdrawal was masterful, controlled, preserving face while conserving force. Muslim cavalry pulled back in disciplined stages, maintaining arrow harassment to prevent any Crusader pursuit. Infantry formed protective rear guard while the baggage train retreated systematically. As Muslim horns sounded the retreat, the Crusaders had achieved the tactically impossible. But their miraculous victory carried poisonous seeds of strategic catastrophe. Baldwin ordered, "Hold position, no pursuit." The exhausted Crusaders watched their tormentors retreat, too tired even to cheer victory. Knights collapsed where they stood. Infantry leaned on blood-slicked pikes. The Iron Hedgehog finally dissolved into exhausted humanity. The immediate toll was staggering beyond medieval norms. 2,000 Muslim dead carpeted the battlefield. Mamluks, regular cavalry, volunteer jihadis. The Crusaders had lost 180 dead, 400 wounded. By any medieval standard, the casualty ratio was impossible. Battles this lopsided happened only in chronicles written decades later, growing fantastically in the telling, but this was documented reality. Baldwin had to be carried from the field on a litter, his body finally surrendering completely to exhaustion and advancing disease. But in winning this miraculous battle, the Crusaders had sealed their ultimate doom. The victory at Belvoir revealed a fatal strategic trap that would destroy the Kingdom of Jerusalem. Baldwin had proven that concentrated Crusader forces using revolutionary tactics could defeat vastly larger Muslim armies. But concentration meant stripping garrisons bare, leaving entire territories defenseless against raiders and economic destruction. You're witnessing the birth of economic warfare in its medieval form. Saladin had discovered the kingdom's Achilles heel with perfect clarity. It didn't matter if Crusaders won every pitched battle, if they had no functioning economy to sustain their expensive castles and knights. The 60 burned villages represented 100,000 dinars in lost agricultural revenue. That equaled the cost of maintaining 500 knights for an entire year, gone in 3 days of systematic burning. The path to Hattin was now clear in Saladin's strategic mind. He wouldn't seek costly pitched battles against concentrated Crusader forces using their new tactics. Instead, he'd force them to defend everywhere simultaneously, raid here, threaten there, besiege an isolated castle, burn more villages. The kingdom would bleed out economically through 1,000 cuts. The Iron Hedgehog formation itself deserves recognition as one of history's great tactical innovations that history forgot. Combining pike squares, integrated missile troops, and rapid countercharge capability, it preceded the famous Swiss pike formations and Spanish tercios by 3 centuries. Yet it died with the kingdom, requiring trained, disciplined troops the Crusader states couldn't maintain long-term. 5 years later, at Hattin, Saladin applied every painful lesson learned at Belvoir. He forced the Crusader army to abandon water sources in summer heat, exhausted them with constant harassment, then struck decisively when they finally broke formation from thirst and desperation. The kingdom that had seemed invincible at Belvoir collapsed in a single catastrophic day. Think carefully about what this means for understanding military history. Sometimes, winning every tactical battle guarantees losing the strategic war. The Crusaders' tactical genius at Belvoir taught their enemy the exact strategy that would destroy them. Victory carried within it the seeds of ultimate defeat. The dying king who defied 30,000 warriors had won a victory that would echo through eternity and doom his kingdom within 5 years. Baldwin IV died in 1185, his body finally consumed entirely by disease. He never knew that his greatest triumph had ensured Christianity's expulsion from Jerusalem. The age of chivalric warfare ended in a single afternoon at Belvoir. In its place rose a crueler arithmetic, economics over heroics, systematic attrition over battlefield glory, strategic patience over tactical brilliance. Saladin had learned that to defeat the Iron Hedgehog, you didn't attack it directly, you starved it economically. And in 1187 at Hattin, that's exactly what he did with devastating success. If this story of tactical genius containing strategic doom fascinated you, subscribe to Flow of History. We bring you the battles, the innovations, the moments where victory and defeat intertwined in ways that changed everything. Hit subscribe now because the next story of impossible triumph hiding inevitable tragedy is coming soon.